I think we can start. Um, we let the other participants join as we go on. So today our speaker is Siddharth Sreenivas. He is head of sustainable mobility in ASAR, and Siddharth has worked on environmental and social impact for over 10 years across the Asia and Africa. He has worked on extensively on climate and mobility and on policy and advocacy. So today he will be discussing us about his work around on this sector and on sustainable mobility network. Coming to Sustainable Mobility Network, it is a collective of organizations who is working on zero emissions, zero exclusion, and zero road deaths. So over to you, Siddharth.
Thank you so much, Roshni. Firstly, I have to start off by apologizing because today has been a very bad day as far as tech is concerned. My laptop completely crashed. My wife just came back from work and she's uses a MacBook, which I've never really used. So I'm gonna figure it out. But if at any point you find technical issues or if you see anything wrong or if you can't hear me, just let me know. And Roshni, if you can just ping me on phone also if there's any tech issues at all, that'd be great. But
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
delighted to be here and to be able to talk to you, all of you. The Changemakers program is, of course, something that we are very excited about. Excited to also see where it goes and what kind of change and work that you all are able to bring in the next months and years going forward. As what are the key takeaways you're going to take back from this program and what you're going to be building on. So I will, of course, be talking to you about the Sustainable Mobility Network that we have in India. I will be giving you some insights into the work that we do and also some of the engagement pathways that we kind of have at different levels that we kind of work on. And of course, it's not going to be a one size fits all. It is almost always very subjective on specific issues, but I think it should give you a bit of a wide sense of what exactly goes on in the transport space across organizations. Roshni, I'm not sure if you're able to share the slide deck or if you can actually give me access, then I can won't bore
Okay,
you with too many
I will.
slide decks. I just have 4 slides.
Okay, I think I will share it. One second.
Yeah, please, if you could, that'd be great. Okay, while Roshni is sharing that, I will just give you a quick background on why the Sustainability Network, Mobility Network. So I'm sure folks have spoken, I mean, you've had multiple speakers in the past also, including my colleague Achutan, who's actually spoken about why transportation is so important in terms of decarbonization. And I think for us, many of us in this space right now with the Sustainable Mobility Network are actually people from a very strong climate background. So when we were actually looking to build work in India around, what are the big issues, where should the key interventions be? I think a growing realization among a lot of organizations, both in the climate space and in the traditional mobility space, who had been working for greater access and so on. The realization came about that it had to be transport that was a core focus, that people actually had to be brought together in the transport space with a very specific climate and emissions lens, and really try to see how that sector could be uh, a key pillar of the whole climate movement going forward. I think about 3 to 4 years, actually 5 years back is when we first started thinking about transport campaigning and actually trying to see how we could bring together organizations. So initially, I think there were about 3 to 4 organizations, including ASAR, the organization that I work with, and also organizations like Purpose. And, we had a lot of other interesting organizations in the transport space actually coming forward and being part of it. And we had multiple discussions and approaches and pathways. And the Sustainable Mobility Network is in many ways a culmination of that. The work, how it came together, how it's been designed is actually, trying to bring together what transport, climate organizations, all of these organizations have wanted to work on collectively. Everyone has their core strengths. What we've really also tried to see is how we could leverage those complementary strengths that different organizations have and really try to bring them together. So could you just go to the next slide? Yeah. And the first thing that we kind of did was trying to really try to see what was the visioning part of it. And this is something I think that was built very, collaboratively between the different organizations, because we wanted the transport aspect of it, accessibility, road safety, all of those to be actually an integral part. And then we also wanted the emissions part of it also to be really clear. So I think the idea of really bringing together those elements with zero emissions, zero exclusion, and zero road deaths. I think that was, key to really how we could tap into the work that different organizations are doing. So when we came together, we decided that we'll work together initially about 15 to 20 organizations. Now we've grown to 40 plus at this point. And we'll focus on 5 states and cities: Delhi, Bangalore and Karnataka, Mumbai and Maharashtra. We do have some work that one of our partners does in Pune, which is Parisar, but we'll come to that later. We have Chennai and Tamil Nadu as a whole, looking at Calcutta and West Bengal also. So the basic premise of the Sustainable Mobility Network is really trying to see how we could disincentivize ICE vehicles. I think that was one key, really crucial part of the whole work, the ecosystem that we were looking to build. How can we actually get that significant shift away from private cars? And then really trying to see how we can have more solutions placed in, more of active mobility, more of public transport, more of electric mobility. And of course, I think on electric mobility, I think it's been a bit of a split field where we've had different perspectives from different organizations. And our network has been quite clear that when we talk about electric mobility, it's not really about replacing one car with another car. Doesn't matter if it's EV. It's really focus as a network has been around really trying to see how we can have those large fleets, those commercial fleets, and those big fleets which are out there. How can we actually get them to transition? If you could just go to the next slide, I'll just mention the key pathways or approaches that we actually were looking to do as part of the work. So in terms of pathways, I think one thing that we were clear was that people really needed to be part of the whole the change process, that we really couldn't be pushing solutions or any alternatives as long as it wasn't really something that people believed in and accepted and wanted as a change, as part of the change process. So I think being able to build those strong people-powered campaigns on clean, equitable, accessible transport, that was a key pathway that we had actually kind of identified, and that all the work that we were doing had to have elements of this, which was being, as a key indicator, the lens that we were applying to it should be able to, tick these different things. One is, of course, people-powered narratives and campaigns. The other is making sure that we are creating the political will among policymakers and the conditions that would actually enable not just the transition. I think we've mentioned this actually says transition to EVs, but I think over the past 3-4 years, we've realized that you're being able to create the political will around different issues, be it on public transport, getting policymakers to look at public transport as an essential service, not just something that needs to have a profit-making element to it. Elements like that, really trying to be able to create a political will around that. That is really important. How do we actually get spaces streets and public spaces redesigned that makes it much more inclusive and accessible, and actually really does promote non-motorized transport. And that was a huge part to it. And of course, in terms of public transport, really trying to see how as different aspects to it, that be it first and last mile connectivity, accessibility, frequency, all these different aspects are really addressed. So this is actually a PPT which was done about 3 years back. We've really tried to see how we can keep it updated, but I think some elements of it, as our work has evolved, I think you will see has gone beyond just certain elements. Right now it says electric powered paratransit solutions, but we're actually looking to see how first it can be about access and frequency and those different elements, and then being about transition to cleaner fuels. So this is the overall framework that we've kind of been looking at. And the last one will actually give you the very clear, the last slide is actually just the objectives that we kind of set for ourselves over the period, over the past 3-4 years that we've tried to, if you go to the last slide, yes, that actually looks at really what would be looking to achieve at the end of 3 or 4 years. And one is, of course, really trying to see how we can build a big movement and the network around urban mobility. We had aimed for 15 organizations, but I think at the beginning it was 9, which grew to 15 within a year. And now we're at 40 plus at the end of year 4. So the growth has been significant. I think the other thing has been about really trying to see how we can shift the narrative. And narrative shift through different processes. We've tried to see how we could shift the narrative through the media, through social media, through different campaigns, how we can actually engage and mobilize people. How can we actually have the shift in narrative in policy circles? That has also been a key part of the work that we've been doing. And that's something that we've really tried to also quantify. One is, of course, there is an impact that you can always look at, but we've actually really been clear about that, when you're actually looking at narrative shifts, you should be able to measure it in a much more qualitative manner. And I think in the last 3 to 4 years, at least in the cities we work in and on the issues we've been working on nationally, we've been able to have significant impact on shifting that narrative towards specific, in the specific directions. The overall cities work is, of course, as I mentioned, looked at trying to see how we can actually have work that looks at disincentivizing private car use, and then, of course, promoting public transport and active mobility. And then, of course, the last is the EV part to it, which I mentioned that we didn't want it to be a catch-all EV work, but be much more targeted and much more impactful. So last mile delivery is in the freight space is actually what we looked at. So yeah, this is just to quickly summarize what were the key objectives we were looking at. I will just run through the top line pieces of work that we have been doing. And I think what might be useful for a session is actually if I can possibly actually just share specific work strands and the interventions we've been doing. And if people have specific queries around it, I think, make it a bit more of an interactive session where you can actually stop and ask me questions in between. I think that would possibly be the best way forward in terms of the work, because there's also a lot to share. I don't want it to just be a one-way, like a extended monologue. So let's see if you want to come in and, ask questions at any point. In fact, let me just stop here right now if people have questions right now at this point. On just what I've shared so far.
You mentioned the creation of political will and, building policy support. What did that exactly look like?
So yes, so that would actually have to go into all the different work streams, which I was going to come to next. But basically what it means is that, for instance, on public transport, as I was giving you an example, actually getting policymakers. So when you go to any policymaker or traditionally, the response is that our STUs, the state transport undertakings, are already loss-making. We cannot put more money into it, or there isn't enough. Where is the money going to come from? I think that is the first thing that kind of refrain that kind of comes up. I think what has changed in the last few years is that there has been a lot more investment and actual people, policymakers, politicians, and bureaucrats both actually saying that, yes, public transport has to be improved. and that it actually needs to be seen. Some have said that it needs to be seen as an essential service. Karnataka, the previous BJP government, I think it was 2 years back or just before the elections, where he actually said that, which was big. I don't think it was reported, but he was the home minister. Sorry, I don't. It was Ashwath Mohan, if I'm not mistaken. But he actually made the statement that public transport is an essential service. That's not a statement you see coming from any quarters. I mean, traditionally, maybe a Congress person might end up saying it, but somebody from the BJP actually saying it actually speaks volumes to the kind of understanding that people have also developed. So traditionally, people from a more right of center or more liberal backgrounds have been taking stance much more strongly on public transport. And because I'm based in Bangalore, been part of the work in Bangalore, we've had MPs actually coming out strongly and actually saying that metro expansion should be prioritized over tunnel roads. That is potentially one example. We've had states like multiple states actually. We've had the previous government in Maharashtra actually looking to really scale up the public transport fleet. Both best, of course, it's played out very differently, but at least there was the intent and they had actually placed the orders for a lot of buses. That I think is great. If you're looking at Tamil Nadu, there's an example where while we would ideally, many would say that, it's a missed opportunity by not having electric buses. I think the fact that the Tamil Nadu government in the past 2-3 years has been actively looking to ramp up bus numbers. They've looked at getting BS6 buses. They've even looked at retrofitting. I mean, I'm not saying one process is better than the other, but the fact that people are actively taking decisions on public transport, which wouldn't have been possible in the past. I would say the 2010s were, there was a lot of policy paralysis as far as a lot of large STUs were going. We've seen a lot more traction in this particular decade, I would say, in terms of movement, in terms of political stands and actually action. So that's just one specific example that I can say. But political will in terms of, political will and action in terms of even fleets transition. So the previous Maharashtra government actually had put in a target of 25% of all the delivery fleets actually transitioning by 2025. Of course, when the government changed, it got put on hold, which is also partly, I guess, fair, considering the reasons they gave was that there was no charging infrastructure and so on, which is fair. And also, I guess, I'm not going to go into the details, but there have been those targets put in. Delhi has come out with an aggregator policy. Of course, I also think that, some of these policies need to be in a bit of moderation and look at all sides of the spectrum. I mean, it can't be just that, it can't be very top down. It has to look at really trying to see how everyone is carried as part of the process. But multiple states actually taking the decision to put in those mandates or take different decisions around aspects like these. I think we are actually seeing as political will on display at different levels. There is a long way to go, though. I think these are, it is sustained engagement on specific issues that have created these changes, but I think it has to be a bit more overarching. I think really being able to build up their capacity and really getting them to see the side to why active mobility is as important as say just public transport investment or maybe EVs. I think all of being able to bring that balance, I think, is potentially what we should all be aiming for in the long run. But I think, yes, getting people reaching out and getting policymakers to actually take progressive stances, I think that has been a key part to it. Sorry, I'm just take one more question before I break down the work, if anyone's
Sir,
got any.
am I audible?
One
Hello?
second.
Awesome.
1 second, Vishnu.
Okay.
So shall I stop sharing the screen? I think I will share the
Yeah, I think you can stop
version
sharing the
with
screen.
different
Sure.
Hi, sir. My name is Vishnu Mohan. I'm from WWF India. Sorry to thing is currently heavy rain is here, so bandwidth is very less. So that's why I couldn't video. So I just want to ask one question is that like about the funding itself. So as a public this buses के लिए like is that currently CSR fund is is utilize, can we utilize CSR funds, or if we can utilize the CSR funds, how it is pooling by the government, or if it is not, if we couldn't utilize the CSR funds, how we can pool that funds into the system?
Yeah, I mean, I've not heard of large examples of CSR funding actually funding bus public transport in a big way. I mean, you have specific area-based approaches, like companies actually saying that we want feeder buses in our area, for instance, providing connectivity from the metro and so on. That has been happening, but not at scale. I think what also happens is where that CSR funding cycles. I mean, you also need to be able to earmark funds over a long term on to really scale up public transport. Maybe there are opportunities I think government could look to explore around this, but I've not seen any examples at scale at this point. Right now, where we are currently seeing a lot of funds being tapped into, one is, of course, there is the international financial institutions, the multilateral development banks, which are actually providing funding for public transport expansion. That is, of course, one example. Then you have the bilateral agencies. I think the work in Tamil Nadu is actually being funded by KfW in Germany. So you have specific agencies. JICA has been funding multiple projects also. We have, of course, a lot of MDBs and bilateral banks, lenders and organizations actually doing that. The other is, of course,
sorry, there is no any technical issue for utilizing the CSR funds for this, Anna?
I think it's just the time duration. See, what we've seen with CSR funding in general has been that unless it comes from the very top, for instance, it doesn't really, the CSR teams basically want that's why you don't see advocacy money being given from CSR funds for advocacy. They want results at the end of the funding year, right? They want something very tangible. So within WWF, if you have advocacy work, if you have something which is more service delivery oriented, the focus would always be around that. I think with if you can have procurement within that period, it's definitely an opportunity. I think it could be potentially scaled down. Unfortunately, there's a mechanism at this place with the states and the governments to actually see how they are actively exploring it. I think if organizations are taking that up, I think it might be very interesting to consider.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
And just on public transport, I think the other big funding opportunities come from central government grants also and different schemes. Now, e-buses, most of it is actually being funded either through, has been funded through FAME 2 or through the new PME Seva, technically what's the FAME 3. So there's also been the bigger, wider bus project, e-bus project that they've announced. So a lot of the financing is actually happening based on that also. I think where the opportunity, at least as far as your question on CSR funding goes, would be around ICE vehicles, diesel buses, BS6 vehicles, or even CNG-based ones, because availability is probably going to be easier in the short run. What we're seeing with at least electric buses is that the order books right now seem to be really, they're all stretched at this point. Maharashtra has just cancelled their contract with Electra. I don't know if anyone saw that. Electra, the big contract, 10,000 buses, which they'd given, they actually had to cancel the contract because the company which was doing it was not able to deliver. And just because they had such a large order book already and weren't able to cater to it. So, yeah. All right. So, what I will just do is actually just tell you about the different strands of work that we kind of have. I was talking about the disincentivization piece that we do. And in terms of disincentivization, I think the biggest piece of work that we've been doing has been around parking policies. So we have multiple organizations doing work in multiple cities. So this includes Delhi, Bangalore to some extent, Chennai, and Kolkata, where we're actually seeing a lot of work on parking policies being done. A lot of the municipal governments or the different agencies involved have been wanting to do parking policies, bringing it into effect. Sure, I just saw the question. I can come back to that in a bit. So just in terms of parking policy, yes. So the big aspect to it is that land in our cities is limited. If you go to any of the big cities, you'll find that most people actually don't have, you know, in their building, parking in their building, or reserved parking, and it's usually on-street parking that happens. What we're basically trying to say is that the argument, and of course, there's so many different nuances to it and so on, but I won't go into that. You can reach out to me later. We can definitely share the different reports and the documents we produced around it. But basically, that land as on-street parking is looking at municipal land, and that actually needs to be monetized. And people should be paying for the parking that they actually, for their private cars. And almost always it's their second car in many cities, or the third or fourth car in many cases, some cases. And municipal governments should really be looking to see how that actually can have, larger parking charges, for instance, could actually be a big deterrent to people using their private vehicles or buying more private vehicles. I think really trying to see how we can get people to start some level of adoption of public transport and shared mobility, and all of that is really key to the whole change process. And parking policies is one big starting point that we've really been focusing on. As I was saying, multiple cities have approached it in different ways. Bangalore, we, in fact, about 3-4 years back, we actually had them come out with draft guidelines, which of course then completely went on the back foot because there was a lot of opposition from many resident welfare associations and so-called citizen groups. But of course, we had other cities also looking to actively implement it. But we are hoping that this is something that will actually be a strong deterrent in the short to mid-term in really trying to see how fewer vehicles can actually be used, private vehicles can be used. And I think the other big 2-3 approaches that we have as part of this work is really looking to see how we can have safe school zones being piloted, low emission zones being piloted. Of course, we're not saying that some kind of core areas in the city, core commercial areas, possibly having additional taxes or on private vehicle or commercial vehicles, for instance. All of these are different stands which are being explored at different levels. So it's not a one size fits all on this particular approach. Some cities, I think, we are approaching it from a very strong road safety lens around road safety and children. And that is actually helping us get safe school zones, getting those piloted, or people showing interest and policymakers showing interest around those. So that is a big strand of work that we do in the cities. I think the other big 2-3 pieces, of course, public transport. I think really trying to see how we can have work around accessibility and just making sure that it is also convenient in terms of frequencies. I think that's something that we're looking to, our network has been working on. So it started at different levels. So about 3 years back, when we were looking at different cities, we realized that many cities, that we work in, don't even have data as far as public transport is concerned. The Bangalore, I'll give you a Bangalore specific example. Bangalore, there wasn't public data being put in there was no publicly available data around buses. And what we actually wanted to use to trigger that was actually we did partner organizations started doing audits of public transport routes, specific routes that were there, looking at women's groups around accessibility, like many lower income women were actually, communities were actually finding their locations were getting lower. They basically had lower frequencies of buses. Connectivity was much lower in lower income areas compared to, say, much slightly more affluent areas. So we actually tried to document these and really try to see how these issues could be highlighted. I think the fact that it was again and again about data, the questions were being raised about data in multiple cities. We actually had, I think currently most of the big cities actually have data in the public domain as far as route, frequencies, all bus information. Most of them have real-time tracking on the buses, the public transport buses, at least as far as the ones operated by the state government. agencies. So I think that is something that's been happening in the last year or two. That's really changed. Data itself is there, and then really trying to see how we can work on making, kind of making sure that it's rationalized. There is greater access based on that data. You're actually able to provide insights and potentially, a roadmap for scaling up. All of those are the other pieces of work that our network has been doing. Uh, the other part has been really trying to see how we can have active mobility supported. Now, that has been a bit of a challenge. As far as active mobility goes, walking and cycling, it's some cities, we've seen that it's actually, there is some level of interest. Of course, as far as we talk as active mobility, it is very localized. We are really not at a stage where we can actually see things at a larger level, at a city level. But I think community-based, localized interventions are something that we are more aiming for at this point. What we've seen is that, some of the cities, for instance, our partners in Calcutta, one of the pieces of work they've been focused on for the first 3 years was there are about 50 or 60 roads in Calcutta which actually are not open to cycles. Even though Calcutta is, it's full of cycles. It has one of the highest number of livelihood cyclists in the country. But you have multiple roads which are not open. But I think as far as policy engagement and advocacy has been concerned, we've realized that at multiple levels, starting from the municipal state right to the state, we realized there's just no interest in changing that. So we've actually had to see how we could maybe pivot and try to see how it could be much more localized and other interventions could be brought in, which could address this to some extent. So yeah, that's the other big piece. We have partners who've also been working on different design elements. So I don't know how many of you all are from Bangalore, but if you actually look at Racecourse Road, you'll see that it's been completely redesigned. And that is something that was an intervention that was, done by one of our partner organizations as part of the SMN. And they had kind of designed that. So we have a lot of examples around urban design. Our partners in Bangalore have been running the Urban Revamp Challenge. Sorry, I'm based out of Bangalore, and for some reason, because these places are closer to me, these are the examples which are coming to mind first. But there are, of course, other design interventions also in other cities. And yeah, so this is where the key contours of the city level work that's been happening. I think just in terms of policy and the engagement process, I would say that, it's very, very different. So when you're talking about parking policy, you will obviously end up going to the municipal government. Sometimes we find that the municipal government actually is not really independent or empowered enough. You'll find that there is no elected municipal government in place. You will find that the state government has much more control, or the local MLAs. So I think when you're looking to go and work on all these different issues, really being able to map that out and really trying to find what are those levers of power, where can you actually bring about change, I think is really important to map out. For instance, on something like a very localized parking policy intervention, if you want there's all these random vehicles coming and parking on your road, in your lane, and it's causing problems for regular commuters, or there's issues caused for the residents there. Who would you go to? I think the one organization which might have power there is not really the local government. It would actually be the traffic police. So also really being able to apply those different lenses. What intervention do you want? How do you want to see it happen? What scale do you want it to happen? And look at it from all those different lenses and see what agency you might need to reach out to. In fact, in my area, I live in a place called Richardstown in Bangalore. The local residents association has actually been engaging with the MLA, with the the BBMP, which is the local municipal corporation. They've been engaging with a lot of different stakeholders on different things. One of the big issues was, of course, people using the area. We're kind of set around a park, and people were just randomly parking it. Vehicle dealers were coming and actually just keeping their vehicles there. People would go off for weeks at a time. You'll find all these vehicles with deflated tires and dust on them, but it was just lying there. Nobody was actually carrying it away. And then they realized that the one agency which actually had power, which could actually do something. I mean, not just at a very local level of getting those vehicles removed, but they actually said they will make sure there are no parking signs put up, signage, and making sure that it is cleared is the traffic police. So in spite of the fact that they went through different layers, they finally realized that the traffic police could easily just handle this. So they can make sure that a narrow lane or where people were parking on both sides and were costing, it was just one lane of traffic, one direction that vehicles could go. They came and actually said that we put up signboards which says one side of the road is no parking, and they could actually take the decision. So of course, I mean, to what degree all those things will it sustain the change of the traffic police inspector who's taken that decision? All those things I think need to be looked at. But you know, there are different levers that you can actually tap into. Is what I'm trying to again stop and see if there are questions that people have. I know there is a question linked to the SDG goals. I will just come to that right after.
One
Sorry.
second,
Yeah, go ahead,
Sid.
Roshni.
I don't. Okay, so I don't know if it is my problem, but I think sometimes the sound is getting interrupted.
I will just make sure I speak into the mic.
Thanks. Are we taking question of Rani?
I have one question. Yeah, sir said that the race course road in Bangalore is being redesigned. So like, could you tell us about
Specific junction there. Yeah.
like I'm also based in Bangalore, so like we never got to know about this kind of information. So like I wanted to know like why and how it is being done there.
I think what I can possibly share is I think a partner organization has actually put up data around it. Let me see if I can find the link right after and share that. But
Okay.
basically, what was happening was there is a flyover that comes in. There is also multiple roads converging, and it was basically a very chaotic signal. And
Yeah.
what's basically happened, and the work is over by the way right now, so you can actually go there and check. So
Okay.
what's happened with the redesign is that it has one slowed down the vehicles. The second is it's made a much more uniform flow of the traffic. So earlier you had a junction where you had a lot of traffic converging from different ends, especially when people had to turn and all of that. There were no lanes weren't demarcated properly and all of that. So you had multiple turns also. You had
Yeah.
I think two going in one direction. There was a U-turn under the flyover that was also there. So I think what's happened now is that a lot of the flow of traffic has actually been streamlined
Okay.
with a properly designed channel.
Sir,
So it's an organization called Compartment S4, which has done this work. I believe they have this information on their website, or yeah, you can just Google it. But if not, I'll just try to share it at the end of the.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
sir, hello. Am I audible?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I can hear you.
Sir, I just want to ask you, like, as you are working with the local self-governments or other stakeholders, like political parties or something like that, what all measures we are like, are you taking for involving the community for the initial processing or after the processing? Like currently, one of the person from Bangalore didn't know about this initiative. So so that is an important thing. Like the community should understand why we are doing this and the change which we have done, and it should be replicated to any other place according to that location. So what all measures you are taking for the involvement of community?
So I think one thing, as far as community engagement has been going. So it depends on the intervention also. For instance, on the parking policy aspect, for instance, they are much more at a policy level where the engagement has been happening. It hasn't really been around community engagement per se. But there are other aspects, like we have partners actually trying to map walking infrastructure in the cities. We have a partner called Sensing Local, which has been doing this Walkable Cities campaign, where they've started out in Bangalore and other places. They've been trying to work with volunteers and local communities to really map what is the state of your walking infrastructure. So, to be honest, I mean, until about 3-4 years back, this wasn't a big issue for me because I would like my area, for instance, had things in what looked like that didn't seem like an issue to me. It's only when I actually telling me that he found it really difficult stuff. It was all up since he found it very difficult to walk on. And he was also pointing out some of the slabs being broken and stuff. And what I was, my next door neighbor, he actually meters, but he's in his late 70s. He drives that 300, 400 meters because he's too scared to walk on that distance. So he drives to the park and then walks inside the park. But what I'm trying to tell you is that, it's issues like these which actually also really need a lot of community engagement, and they're the ones who can actually tell you what is wrong in the best way possible and how to fix it. The walkable cities work that I'm talking about. In fact, they're just doing that work in Kochi right now, and they've been doing it for all the wards there. It's a GIZ fund project that they've been doing it as a part of, and really doing walkability audits with local communities and volunteers. I mean, that's just to give you one example, but I think for a lot of other pieces also, for instance, the public transport work, I don't think any audits have taken place without the actual engagement and support of the communities there. They're the best ones who can actually tell us, who can actually also be the best spokespeople for change. So again, giving you a very Bangalore example, but the community, we've actually created a community women's rights-based community around this called Ali Sarona, and they've actually been doing advocacy, and the women themselves have been doing the advocacy with different stakeholders around the issues related to public transport that they've been facing. So yes, it hasn't been comprehensive and across the board. I think that's something we really need to figure out as a network. How can people be an integral part of all the work that we actually do? But I think we've had some great successes, some great pieces of work where people have been involved, but of course, definitely needs to be scaled up.
We have a question from Miraj.
Some of the work we were involved in the initial series of your career. Oh, very interesting question. And early stages of my career, I was actually in the climate space, but not involved in sustainable mobility. So many of us working and supporting the network. So for instance, my key area has been actually around designing campaigns and pathways, and it is in some ways slightly issue agnostic, I would probably say. So a lot of my initial work has actually been around, I started out working in agriculture, sustainable agriculture. Did that climate adaptation, of course, in the last 15 years has been a growing thing. So slowly was focused around that, and then started working more around climate mitigation issues and energy transition. And then that's when I finally completely transitioned in the last 4 years to working on mobility. But of course, so we have experts within the network. A lot of our organization partners are experts in mobility, who've actually who are architects, urban planners, come from different backgrounds, but we also have a lot of climate generalists, so to speak. So
did we take okay, Amrita. How adapt is your building codes and city planning rules when we speak about accommodating parking, cycling, Okay. How adaptive is your building codes and city planning rules when we speak about accommodating parking, cycling, and other resilient mobility systems that LS your city limits?
I think what you'll find is every master plan, see, maybe not at a very building code level, but when you look at a city and look at a very top level, top down thing aspect to it, which the master plan in many ways is what actually represents the visioning process around it. It will have a lot around cycling and active mobility and infrastructure, connectivity, all these different buzzwords and keywords put in. But what we've seen is that on ground implementation still leaves a lot to be desired for. I think that's where citizens and community is actually being able to do that, bring up the pressure and the demand around it. That's where it's really important. What we also probably need to realize is that any significant urban design or infrastructure interventions also do require significant investments. Many cities or areas or even wards specifically don't really have the level of funding that is required. Of course, if a big grant comes in, there's a central government grant or additional state government grant, then of course it's easier to make things move. But right now, I think it's also about what are those interventions which are possible given the resources that are kind of available. I think being able to, once you start working at a much more local, hyper-local level, that's when you'll kind of realize these challenges. I mean, for instance, in my area, we've been trying to get the roads fixed. We've had really, I don't think tarring has happened of the roads in my area for the past 2 years at least, and we've been trying to get it addressed, and we keep hoping that with every year in the budget that work will happen, but it's just been stuck in a limbo. And of course, there are policymakers, MLAs who've actually seen that areas within their wards are addressed, have great roads. They're able to unlock the funds. But of course, that's also where you need the political will and all those different elements to it. If you don't have an MLA who's either senior enough or is influential enough, I mean, just to give you an example, MLA, or it could be different stakeholders, then it ends up being a problem.
We have a question from Hariharan from his experience on Chennai.
Yeah. It is an interesting question, and it is something that probably needs to be looked at. If the state governments are actually able to, or if the city governments, like for instance in Maharashtra, Pune, for instance, or Mumbai, the municipal corporation actually controls and funds the local bus networks. It's not the state government per se. In South India, Bangalore, or even Delhi, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, we have a situation where the state government actually operates the state transport, the state transport undertaking, which operates intra-city buses also. So it is an interesting question. I think that needs to be looked into a bit more deeply. We've seen examples like, I'll give you an example. I was just talking to a colleague from an organization which works in Punjab. They were saying that most of the cities in Punjab doesn't have intra-city transport, which is run by the government. It is all private operators. And of course, it is also deeply entrenched. You have a couple of big political families actually running those buses. And what's happened is that it's completely driven by profit. They will operate buses based on either what is more profitable, or it will run based on what is more politically beneficial, or there's two different elements to it. So yes, if there are aspects of the intracity travel which could be broken down, some incentives could be given. There might have to be some level of subsidies on a purely private profit run model. I'm not sure if accessibility and scale can be done. You might, like for instance, like the IT corridors in Chennai. Let's say Perungudi to somewhere in the city, for instance, where you have the IT parks and all that. You might be able to have private bus operators operate Volvo buses and all that, which would be great quality. They will also possibly generate profits. But is that something that can be replicated elsewhere? I think that's a bit of the question. How do you break that down? How do you really make that profitable? How do you make sure that it's actually serving the interest that you want? I mean, that people want rather than the other side, different aspects to it. So I won't give you a definitive answer on that. I don't think I have one. Kerala has done this very successfully in the past, in the 70s and 80s. Kerala didn't have enough buses. And this is not for intracity, it was intercity. Uh, I mean, we've all heard about public routes and private bus routes. Uh, a lot of the private bus routes are actually technically those routes uh, which are owned by either which should be run by the public transport company KSRTC, but they don't have the buses to do that. So the government actually has been giving private sector to do that. So earlier there was a model which actually looked to generate revenues from those routes, the licenses and the operation of those private routes, which would actually help subsidize and be invested in public transport. Post the 90s, that particular model has completely taken a different shape. So it's not really a model where one is subsidizing the other, unfortunately. But yeah, that's just one example. So yeah, I think that was a long-winded answer, but I think since I don't have a very definitive yes or no, I just wanted to give you the different aspects to it. So I'll just go to the other question that's okay, cities, and I'm assuming that you're talking about the global south. I mean, places like Europe and others, I don't think potentially, I mean, of course, while there's a lot of stuff we can learn from them, it should be, I don't think those are models which completely should be replicated in our context. I think in Southeast Asia, we have some great examples that have been coming up of subsidized public transport. Even everyone, when they're talking about transport, looks at metro, they look at public transport in terms of buses. Nobody really looks at trains. I mean, nobody talks about it in a big way, but I think countries like Indonesia, others have been doing a lot around trains. That is something even China has done so much around intercity travel, where I think I don't know if anyone actually saw this article that Annie Mukherjee had written recently about how we are focusing much more on road transport. It just came out a couple of days back. I was just going through it, but the basic premise was that India's focus has been so much on road infrastructure and road transport. We've actually ignored the railway network. It is one of the largest in the world. Unfortunately, it's not been scaled up, improved, or expanded in the way it should have been, which could actually have helped address our public transport challenges or the issues in a big way. Right now, freight, a bulk of it is actually focused on road transport. If I'm not mistaken, I think numbers were significantly high. Of the total freight in India, about 90% plus actually is dependent on road transport. While in countries like across the world, look at China, look at the US. US is the largest rail network in the world, although a very small part of it is actually operated for. They don't use it for passenger services. Almost 90% or 95% of the rail network there is used for freight. So I think there are, those learnings I think we should really try to see how we can bring in. It might also mean that we might not need that breakneck. I don't know, I was horrified, or maybe it's good, maybe it's not, but I think 40 lakh crores is what we spent in the last 10 or 11 years in the highways expansion, what the NHAI has raised to build those networks. So I think a partial investment in trains and the railway infrastructure would have possibly also had additional bonuses if we had to take any learnings. Yeah.
Jenny has a question revolving around the uh, inclusion of vulnerable groups in decision making and planning. Is there any significant change around that?
Is this as far as government projects go, or is it with the network and the work that we do?
the government projects or any other projects, that's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as transport projects have been concerned, with the NHAI and the land acquisition process, I mean, road infrastructure, at least expansion is mostly not in the cities, but outside the cities. I think it's been a mixed bag. I really don't think much has been done around that, but that's one part to it. Within cities, again, I think what's happening, again, I'm sorry, since I'm Bangalore based, I keep these projects are the ones which come to my mind. Look at the tunnel road, for instance, that the deputy CM has actually been pushing. Is that really the best solution? And how much is it actually going to benefit a lot of the groups which actually need those accessibility? I think it's very debatable. Are different segments of society are their perspectives looked at? I think that's a very big question that we all should be asking about the different projects that are coming up. Yeah. Has there been a change? I would probably, on the whole, probably say not. I think that is one area where actually needs to be a lot of effort.
So Anu was asking around urban flooding, which is getting common, and the challenge to sustainability. What do you think about this gap and how it can be addressed?
I think the reason for urban flooding, I think, is transport. I think transport projects in particular are increasingly playing a big role. Again, going very hyper local in terms of Bangalore, but I think if you have examples of multiple areas being flooded, like because of the new Bangalore-Mysore highway, for instance, we've had multiple areas which never actually had flooding in the past, getting flooded because it was designed in a very improper way where the actual flow of the water was cut off, and which actually caused flooding in different areas. I think overall urban planning, really looking to see how that can be holistic, comprehensive, looking at all these aspects. Public transport is just one part of it. I mean, transportation is just one part of it, but yeah, I think that being much more comprehensive, people actually looking at it a lot more holistically. Why would you want to cut off the water flow from a lake? I mean, as part of when you know it's going to get flooded. I think people are increasingly seeing the climate impact. So I'm hoping the design process actually improves because of this, because it's so current and it's just every year you're talking about this and you're hearing this. I think the 90s, 2000s, and the 2010s, you didn't really have these urban hazards, so to speak, the extreme climate hazards that you had happening at that frequency. Now it's happening so much more. I'm really hoping that actually triggers a lot more comprehensive planning around this. I think data around public transportation, I think a lot of the STOs actually put it out, or they have apps which give you all the information. So where you don't have, you could possibly look at options like RTI, I would say. But I think primarily this thing is where data is available. Right now, I also realized that RTIs should possibly be looked at as the last option where you don't have any access to information at all. Usually, I think a lot of the public transport company undertakings are actually putting out the information. Yeah.
Is there any other questions? I think we can wind up after 2 or 3 questions. So I have a question regarding your work around. Am I audible?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, I have a question around your work around the electric EV transitions and the major works you have done.
So I think that is also the piece of work that I actually forgot to mention. So our work around EV transition, up to three different levels. One is, of course, at a much more hyperlocal level where we're looking to see how autos and taxis, and we've been doing this in about two cities. Third city, we just started the engagement. We've done it in Calcutta, where we've been working with auto unions there, really trying to identify what are the barriers of entry, what are the barriers that are kind of stopping them from actually adopting electric vehicles. We started the work about 3 years back, and I'll just say that the work on that has been slow because we also didn't want it to be a thing where we're constantly pushing them, or they were actively trying to kind of force a transition around that. What we've seen is that within the last 3 years, at least as far as three-wheeler autos are concerned, the landscape has actually changed very significantly. So one of the big concerns they had was around that I think about the vehicles themselves, about the maintenance, about fixed battery vehicles. So what we've seen is that one, I think with the initial influx of people who were starting to use the vehicles, they're getting a lot of word of mouth. The one auto driver who's actually got an EV auto has actually been telling others about, okay, this is how it's been working out for me. This is how much the maintenance. I think those practical aspects of it have been helping. The concerns around, the fact that I don't have a place where I can actually stop my vehicle and charge in the night. That was a big concern for a lot of people we were actually hearing. We actually have seen that right now in the last 2 years, but now almost all of them have these swappable battery models. The cost goes up, but I mean, per battery, your per kilometer cost, but your upfront cost is actually going down. So I think a lot of people are preferring that. So that's just to give you an example around paratransit, the shared mobility aspect of the work that we've been doing, how we've been engaging with unions. The other work has been around fleets and companies that we've been doing. We have partner organizations who've been actively engaging with companies to see how their fleets, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, different segments could actually be transitioned to EV. And I had multiple, so we have a partner called the Climate Group, which has a program called the initiative called the EV100. We've had some of the big companies in India making commitments in the last 3-4 years. So for instance, Flipkart, Zomato, multiple smaller companies, IKEA, for instance, and others have actually been making commitments and actually doing the transition. Right now, I think the commitment timeline for that EV100 is 2030, which I think might be 2035. And I think they're looking to see how it can be increased going forward. That's the other part of the work. We've been engaging on EV policies at the state level and also with the NITI Aayog and the Ministry of Heavy Industries. In terms of stakeholders, I think these are the big ones. Of course, you have, for instance, when it comes to fuel efficiency, the key nodal ministry would be the Ministry of Power. You have the Ministry of Environment, which is also a stakeholder nationally. Within the states also, you will find that for EV policies, different states have different ministries. Maharashtra, for instance, has the Environment Ministry, and I think the the Transport Ministry actually as nodal ministry. They're supposed to set up an EV cell and really see the implementation. Again, a lot of these states have different levels of implementation. So you would find that states come out with 5-year EV plans, EV policies. At least half of them, I would say, are never really fully implemented or implemented in spirit. A lot of it is just on paper. What we've seen is that, there's power, transport, industries, environment. These are the key ministries of the state government level, which actually play big roles as far as EV policies and EV implementation goes. Of course, based on which state you come from, Tamil Nadu, for instance, or Karnataka have a lot more like a supply side focus. They want companies to come and invest in setting up EV manufacturing and infrastructure. So a lot of the focus has been on that, and industries departments in those cases are the nodal ministries, because that's the key the industry-facing department there. You will have some other states which actually have transport department. Delhi, for instance, transport department's been doing a great job around demand generation. Some other states also doing that. So I see we have a question here. Do you see hybrid vehicles as a viable transitional solution? Okay. I don't think hybrids are a bad idea, but I think as far as large fleets go, hybrid shouldn't be the alternative. It just distracts when you actually have when you're looking at fleets transition. I think we should be looking at options with the lowest emission profiles at this point. And while there are a lot of people who would say that debate the whole emission profiles, I think right now at least it's conclusive with a lot of the peer-reviewed research around EVs and vis-a-vis hybrid. So yeah, I think if people want to and see it as a cheaper option in some ways, I think the Japanese have invested a lot of money into hybrid technology, for instance. You might have cheaper hybrids which are more accessible. In the long run, I don't see that being a big advantage either. I think it's just a personal choice as far as private vehicles go. I think for fleets, I think it should be EVs. Also, I think the big push for us has been that, the next, people at the turn of the decade, 2020, were like, we have the next 10 years to actually do the maximum we can around reducing climate impact or the emissions. I think we are really kind of running out of time. And we have a lot of companies, we have a lot of governments, which have really, really long-term commitments around net zero and all of that. I'm not even sure what is going to be feasible in the long run, what is going to happen and not. What I think we should be doing is trying to see how we can have maximum reductions where possible. And I think, especially in aspects like fleet, you will find that right now in some segments, it is very possible. So that's why we should be looking to do that to the maximum possible. That's my personal approach around this. And of course, just last one thing is that every manufacturer, like for instance, like the Japanese auto companies have been investing significantly in doing advocacy globally. So if you talk to people across the globe, Toyota, Honda, and others have been investing significantly in making sure that hybrids are seen as the interim or intermediate transition fuel. There is billions being poured into that lobbying alone. So I think that is also something that we should be being cognizant of. That yeah.
I think we can stop it here. Is there any other questions? We can take one more or. So thank you, Siddharth, for your session. It was a great discussion, and you have given us insights about the Sustainable Mobility Network and the amazing work the network is doing, and also on your work and the work on EV and what is happening in EV transition in all over the world. On the last part, what you're saying that on the last part, what I'm thinking is that every step counts. Like every step that we are taking on reducing this global warming or carbon emission works, and that's one thing that I am believing in. So thank you for your session. Thank you, Siddharth.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you. If you, maybe Roshni, if you can just share my email or something. If people want to reach out, definitely do that. I don't have all the answers, but what I do know and what I can promise is that I can definitely connect you to people who might have the answers that you're looking for. So yeah. Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to all of you. Yeah. Thank you.